This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon and welcome to the HBCU Hire webinar series. My name is Nate Eichhoff, the Senior Operations Manager with the Leading Niche. So what is the HBCU Hire Initiative? Led by the Leading Niche, it is a partnership with over 75 federal contractors to recruit and mentor students and alumni from historically Black colleges and universities. Many individuals think about working for the government, but have you considered working with a federal contractor who also supports the federal government? Federal contractors account for millions of jobs globally and help the government agencies fulfill their missions. Whether it's a CDC, and we're well familiar with their public health mission, or the Department of Homeland Security to keep us safe, or the Space Force and its mission to conduct global space operations, and the career options are endless. Each month, we'll have different federal contractors participate in a panel discussion to introduce you to career options. We also provide one-on-one mentoring. So if interested, please send a note to hbcuhire@theleadingniche.com and we will coordinate that. So without further ado, let's get started with our esteemed panelists, where today's topic will be focused on data analytics careers supporting the federal government. We'll go ahead and start with introductions, and we will start with John Hamad, and then continue down the list.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm John Hammond. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for IT Concepts. We're a 8A SD VOSB company supporting the lots of 20 agencies across the federal government, primarily Social Security, Defense Intelligence Agency, Air Force, VA are probably our main clients. We support data services, management consulting, and IT services in all those spaces. So a lot of data analytics, a lot of data and AI, ML, and a lot of cloud engineering.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we'll pop that over to Ariel.
Hi, my name is Ariel Silbert Mandel. I work at the same company as John, so I'll spare you the description. I actually work under John as a senior data solutions manager in his office, basically looking at data solutions within our organization, data solutions we can offer to our clients, and leading R&D efforts and other work like that at the company.
Thank you. Let's kick it over to Mr. Nathaniel.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Erzaz, the CTO for Omni Technologies. We're a 8A based out of Aberdeen Proving Ground. We support customers such as the Army, and our claim to fame really is more so on the cyber side and the machine learning side. So I think you guys may be tracking a project called Project Maven, which a few years back, right, Google employees made a little bit of a big deal about. So we have past performance and expertise in areas such as machine learning, right? So I know it's a buzzword, but we really do support the Army in those types of areas. So looking forward to the discussion today, especially as it relates to data, because obviously data is a key input as you train ML models, right? So just excited about today's panel and learning more from the team as well.
Thank you. Let's kick it over to Mr. Dan Butler.
Yeah, good morning, Dan Butler with InfoGain Consulting. We're an 8A company as well. Also, we have some, our main customers are Department of State, Health and Human Services, USPTO, Department of Commerce. On the data analytics side of stuff, we do some data analytics from the standpoint of grant management type stuff that we do, as well as we instituted a case management system over in Kenya for the law enforcement community over there, and collecting the data that they needed to be collected, everything from police and law enforcement data to they recently did the election over there, and gathering that information and being able to do the analysis on it further down the road. That's part of what we do in terms of gathering the information. And then as we go further down into the contracts, when they want other information gathered or gleaned from that data, then the analysis portion comes in, and we develop the, for lack of other words, the algorithms and stuff like that for the analytics that we need. So
Awesome. Thank you very much. Now kick it over to Miss Debbie Pertzok.
Hey everyone, it's Debbie Perdzak. I'm with Annika Systems. We're a small women-owned company. Some of our main projects are with some of the Treasury departments, Health and Human Services, as well as Homeland Security. We focus on data analytics as well as cloud automation and development and robotic process automation.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And now, last but not least, so Miss Hillary Yancey.
Hi, my name is Hillary Yancey. I'm the Human Resources Manager at Global Systems Engineering. It's an SBA certified hub zone small business. We work directly with federal, state, military leadership, primarily within the defense, energy, and environmental sectors. We have a myriad of job openings from data analytics up to like a nuclear physicist. 90% of our positions require clearances, or you have to be, of course, clearance eligible. Um, we have a lot of movement going on with some contracts that hopefully we're going to be winning shortly. So that's really just a nutshell of where I work and what I do.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for those introductions. We'll go ahead and jump right into the first question, and then just keep it rolling. So, how do you suggest a new graduate get into a data analytics career with the federal government or supporting the federal government? We'll hear from Debbie and Hillary on this one.
Okay, I can go first. My first piece of advice, especially during the early months of the year, springtime, if you're going to graduate soon, is just apply for internships. A lot of federal companies, they have really good internships, and that's just a really good way to get in the door, get an idea of the culture, the commute, kind of what the core hours look like. And then just networking. I mean, they see hundreds of resumes a day, I'm sure. So it's just really like getting in the door with developing relationships and connections too. And a lot of people I know, they didn't necessarily get hired directly for a data analytics role. They were like an admin or something just to get in the door, get the clearance or get the experience and learn about the company culture. And then after a period of time, just apply for positions that more like correlate to what they graduated for or what they want to do. And that would just be my first few pieces of advice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Hillary. Some of the things we look for that we like to see on the resume would be any kind of previous or current development experience or any kind of cloud background. So certainly, looking for the internships. All of our positions as well require some type of clearance or at least government background investigation. So if you really want to pursue a career with the federal government, just make sure that you're situated, to be able to obtain that clearance.
Awesome. And kind of going off of that, and really part of something that's very important for new graduates is figuring out what interests you. So the next question, we want to hear about what types of data your companies work with, whether it's from supplier diversity to cloud-based data analytics. So we'll hear from John, Ariel, Adazaz, and Dan on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I could start with that. Back to the prior question, though, one plug I'll give is there's a program I know that it's at Howard. We participate in one called Forge, which came out of UVA, and they do internships through Forge as like a matching process. So if that's available to you at Howard, I would definitely look into that program. We use them quite a bit. So. As for types of data, so it's a broad question, but and it gets into some of the problems we have when we get to the contracts. Data, everyone wants to be a data scientist to start out, but oftentimes there's a data engineering problem first. The data is very dirty. It comes from a lot of different sources. So having the background in data engineering, understanding the underlying databases themselves, and how to manipulate the data, do ETL, things like that is often the first part of data science before you actually get to do the cool AI ML algorithms and come up with your conclusions. So there's a lot of that work that has to happen ahead of time. Um, on the data science side, a lot of our work is in NLP. There's definitely numerical data as well, but a lot of government data comes in text form, whether it's at the Intel as Intel reports, or if it's healthcare reports, call center reports, you name it. Like a lot of them come in as text or speech converted to text. And then a lot of the part of it the government deals with is they have a lot of high level managers and they like dashboards. So things like Tableau are very useful to them. It's not really data science per se, but it's a lot of analytics, metrics, things like that. So we cover the broad spectrum of data in those respects. At different agencies, the data types definitely vary. Social Security Administration, we deal with some fraud, disability, call center data. So, in fraud, we're looking for typical indicators of fraud. On the AI side, you might be doing confusion matrices, which are backwards in a fraud case, because you're trying to prove that something bad happened versus something didn't happen at all, which is 90% of the time. Disability data, where we might do determinations on when we should pay benefits out. So that would be, doctor says this person's sick, they're going to die in 2 weeks if they don't get their money. So we, instead of waiting the usual 2 or 3 month process to run through all the paperwork, we'll run an algorithm on it, determine who's the least likely as fraud, most in need, most would benefit most from that kind of data, that kind of help right away. So we can bubble up those answers to the top really fast. At the call center side, we might do things like analyze the call center agent and how do they responded, did they do a good job, things like that. At the VA, we deal with a lot of health records. At DIA, we do a lot of human resources data and the USPTO as well. So we manage a lot of human resources data, helping with career mobility, retirement, things like that. We deal with the Office of Inspector General as they do investigations into cases. So they might be gathering log data and things like that on people's activities to build a case that they did or did not do something bad at the agency. At Kessel Run for the Air Force, we've done maintenance. We've built algorithms to help out with predictive maintenance for aircraft, F-22s and F-35s. We've done mission modeling where we might take a look at how effective was that mission, did weapons hit target, things like that. And help out with the general air tasking order. At other parts of the Air Force, we do with a lot of acquisition data. They have, in one case, 400 back-end systems that deal with various aspects of all the different parts of the Air Force, and they have a lot of redundancy in that system. So we do a lot of analysis for determining which systems should go forward, which ones should get funding, which ones are duplicative, and to help them migrate the ones they need to keep it to the cloud, or end them as needed. At the USD, AA, IRS, DIA, even we do a lot of RPA work. That tends to be in a case where they've got a lot of older systems and they need to get data from one system to the other system, and RPA is a great way to glue those systems together. So we deal with all kinds of different data. And a lot of cleanup of the data ahead of time, and then sometimes we get to do really cool things and make some do some predictive analytics or mission modeling. So I think that probably covers it. Ariel, I can kick it to you real quick.
Yeah, that definitely, I think, covers the bulk of it. And I would just say also, I think that government data offers unique challenges and opportunities that can be very exciting. Some people hear you'll have to do a lot of data engineering, and that sounds like a boring or bad thing. But also, there are unique challenges to saying, can I use data that requires a clearance, look at the specific data point to generate insights that you don't need to be cleared to see? And, there are just these interesting questions around how to use data that's very siloed or data that's in natural language that the agency may not have considered to be data historically, but there are new tools that have come out that would allow you to mine that natural language data to generate insights for, say, an HR department in a government agency, where, again, generally speaking, you wouldn't be able to, unless you're in HR, look at someone's specific file and see their performance, but you might be able to generate useful insights that could guide their work in going forward. So I think there are these interesting challenges that go into that data engineering in particular, around data that's cleared, data that's private, and how you can use it and how you can break down silos and allow for useful insights to be brought to light.
Yeah, yeah, I'd like to actually add to that. One of the things we do internally at ITC is we use our AI to scan all our resumes, all of our proposals, and do, for our employees, we do a gap analysis on their resumes across the company to see where their skill sets, might need to be improved. So we can proactively identify that before the employee says, "Boy, I wish I really took an RPA course." We can look at it and say, "Hey, look, this RPA is coming across these contracts. You have all the other skills. We suggest you take an RPA certification course." So, we even use it
This is Dan.
internally.
If I can add into that and go back to the previous question, what Jonathan was just saying, as people are writing their resumes, trying to get into the government's position and everything like that, understand what their skill sets are and what they could offer the government in this position, because adding those skill sets on that resume so that when his system does the scan that says, do you do X, that comes up in the thing and that highlights that, and that you're good at that. When you're selling yourself, make sure you sell yourself positively and truthfully, because I think that tends to make our job easier when we're trying to get people into the company.
Awesome.
You're on mute,
Awesome.
Nate.
Say that again.
No, I was going to say you were on mute, but you're good now.
Oh, sorry about that. Azaz, anything to add to that question?
I'll just add a little bit, but I think between Jonathan and Ariel, I think they did an excellent job, right? With regards to just the types of data that we deal with, right? A lot of it is classified. So just going back to the Maven case, because I mean, whoever's watching this, right? If they would Google Maven, there's a lot of information on what Maven was for the entirety of the DoD. But once you start looking at the crux of Maven, right? Yeah, they were dealing with classified data, but you could replicate a lot of that. For example, using a drone, right? So a lot of times where we ran into a classified problem, what we would ask our academic partners to do would be like, hey, just set up a drone, collect some footage, train a model based off of the drone footage you're collecting there, and then do some transfer learning to transform that for our specific use case, right? And Maven got, monster sized into the program where we were killing people. We were not, right? So Jonathan and Ariel probably have deep knowledge of what Maven was and is, right? That really was to make an analyst's job easier to identify, what was kind of happening within the videos, the overhead videos that we were collecting. So a lot of times, yeah, we're dealing with classified data, but most of this can be replicated, or at least, as you're looking to see where you can apply what you've learned in the industry to the government space, right? There's things you can use to go after open source data and then replicate the capability. But besides that, right? So those are the top level, like really nice use cases where you have an Intel platform collecting some Intel related data. On the Army side, right, besides Intel, we also collect logistics data. So Army has big systems, right, big systems in both tactical systems that need to be maintained, but then some ERPs, basically business systems that tell you what a tank is composed of, what parts are in that tank. So you try to do some predictive maintenance based off of how much a tank has gotten used, right? Because there's cycles on, for example, just the bores and the rifling within the barrels of the tanks, the big barrels that they have, right? There's also financial data. So Army has bills to pay out, Army has contracts to pay out, people to pay out. So there's a system called GFIBS, right, that we deal with. So GFIBS is the Army tender, and it's based off of actually something called SAP, which uh, Ariel and Jonathan, I'm sure, are familiar with, but it's super hard to work with, right? So SAP, you can't really get inside of it. Like, forget machine learning, right? Just getting access to like an SAP type database, which is pretty much like, for lack of a better word, right, archaic. But the Army has decided now for the next iteration of their business systems, they're going to stick to SAP. So it's also building that institutional knowledge of legacy systems, right? That may, yeah, for the lack of a better term, may not be sexy, but you still have to work with them. So a lot of times, I mean, not sure how many like college students are hearing this, but if you have some SAP knowledge, yeah, man, it's like it may not be the most, again, for lack of a better word, sexiest job, but if you have that knowledge, people will pick you up because it is very hard to hire for. It is very hard to integrate with, but that is something you got to work with, right? And then there's also like personnel data, right? So as Jonathan, both Ariel have probably dealt with, and then probably Dan as well, there's a lot of PII, personally identifiable information, and PHI, the health information that's within our records as well. So just got to make sure that we're doing proper data management, right? So proper security in place as you're doing cleanup, because as you start aggregating information, right, you're generating PII, you're bumping up the classifications, right? So just got to be careful in how you deal with classified or unclassified information, because you can bump it up if you have bump up the classification level if it just has a bunch of unclassified information together. So don't mean to go off on a rant, but data is a pretty big topic.
Yeah, I would
Awesome.
say to some people, the complications around government data can sound really intimidating and upsetting. But if you're, say, the type of person who really enjoys complicated strategy board games, which I know are really big right now, it feels a lot like that. There's a very complicated setup. There are complicated sets of rules. There are hidden barriers that you may not run into right away. And in the same way people love these complicated strategy board games and love things like D&D, there's a lot of that same sort of, it scratches your brain the same way. The challenges around government data in particular, because it is siloed and it's not always accessible, and there are rules around who can see it and when they can see it and in what context they can see it, and those create these very sort of complicated puzzles to solve, which personally I think are really interesting and really fun. And obviously the payout is you help a government agency achieve their mission, which is great.
And
I would add to that also that I think that it's important to look at that because data, no matter what it is, you're looking to improve something or looking to enhance something. My son, I should have him on this call. My son does data analytics for a utility company, but to start that out, before he ever did it, he was working for T. Rowe Price, and he was finding a way to improve the process time for their electronic processes. And it's just because he was doing all that stuff, building his resume, for lack of other words, he gets picked from somebody else because he said, okay, if you do anything more than once, you can measure it. If you can measure it, you can improve it. And if you have that attitude, especially like that she mentioned in the D&D world and all that other stuff, how do I do this? The next step, it's like a chessboard. What's the next step in that process? And what's the things down the road you're looking at trying to do in the end result?
And lastly, one thing I'll add there, because it's a unique problem, or more so a unique space, right? Maybe a better term. I've realized, we're somewhat going to, or through, sorry, an economic downturn, right? Very rarely you'll find that downturn hit the federal agencies, right? Or at least our space, because I think once you get your foot in the door, whether that be on the data analytics side, cyber, contract management, whatever have you, within our federal space, right? I think the opportunities are endless, and it's a pretty secure environment, right? Because it does require, right, whether if it's clearance or even if it's unclassified work, a lot of times it has to be a U.S. citizen, and those jobs are harder to give up. So I think just even the job security aspect part of it, independent of just the data analytics piece, I think is a pretty intriguing point of our industry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, no, that was awesome information and very detailed and helpful. So, kicking into the next question, what are the most important skill sets and certifications that a candidate should pursue when trying to get into this space supporting the federal government? We'll hear from Debbie, Hillary, and Dan on this one.
Okay. Yeah, and I can start off there. Um, it is a tough market right now. When we post an intern position, I mean, we might get 500 applicants, within just a couple day window. So obviously, we're looking for somebody that maybe has had a programming background, or at least some classes, or done some personal work, with maybe .NET, Python, JavaScript. When we bring in an intern, any type of cloud exposure, or some basic cloud certifications, like some of the fundamental certifications. That's certainly something that we look for. And from a data analytics standpoint, we like, once we onboard somebody, we like to kind of put them on a track to get additional certifications with, like Azure Data Fundamentals and, the data engineer, and then on to Databricks. So we're definitely, partnering with Databricks and seeing a lot more work with that skill set specifically.
I can't I'll caveat everything she just said because I agree with that. I would also say if you look at the current software that a lot of the companies use, you mentioned SAP earlier, but you also have like ServiceNow and things like that. If you have some familiarization with those kind of software packages, that can help the company improve themselves. Again, and even if you could go out and get your own certification on something, on some of those things before you try to sell yourself, you're just going to stand up heads and tails above somebody else on a resume.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, it does depend on like the customer and where they're at and what the needs are for the position. But just obviously speaking the languages for data analytics, core competencies like presentation skills. I know that all the busy bee work behind the scenes, but also if you have to present this to someone in a meeting, just having that communication style or presenting it in a way so other people who are not maybe as versed in the topic so they understand it. Because sometimes I look at this stuff and people are trying to explain it to me. I'm like, okay, I don't know what this is. So also just going in those skill sets of, and also problem solving, attention to detail, working well with others, just to add on to the skill sets and certifications for data analytics are really important too.
If I could add one more thing on there, especially on the DoD side, Security Plus or some of the IT requirements, if you can get those basic ones in. I mean, I'm doing a contract right now. The bottom line is if you don't have Security Plus, I can't even use your resume.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that's definitely important. The government sets the stage with their qualifications, and if they don't have the bare minimum to meet that, then your hands are tied, regardless of how good they are. So that's a good point. All right, so kicking into the next question, now that once you get past the first stage, once you get past the resume stage and get into the phone screen and interview, what are the intangibles that may not show up on a job description that we are looking for in candidates for these types of positions, and as well as to join your companies? Because once they join the company, they're an agency or an agent of your company and a representative of your culture and who you guys are as well. So we will hear from John, Ariel, and Ada Zaz.
All right. I think I let Ariel go first.
I'm going to start with what I see as the really, really big one, which is communication. And communication skills are not a thing. I mean, you can write on your resume, obviously, I am good at communicating. I personally always test for it in interviews. I want to hear how someone explains what they've done. I want to hear how they respond to follow-up questions. I want to know that they can give a comprehensible answer to anything. And the reason for that is I strongly believe that a data science role is inherently an interpreter role. You are constantly going, especially I think when you're doing government contract work, especially, you're going between people who are highly technical and people who are highly business oriented, and you need to be able to hear a business problem someone's having and translate that into technical specs. What am I going to do with the tools that are available to me to solve that business problem? What is the data that goes into finding a solution or finding the insight they need? And you need to go back the other way. Someone says, I have this cool technical project. You need to be able to say, okay, here's how it responds to the business needs state that we know are around us. And at our company, for instance, you could also have people internal to our company reaching out to you to ask questions. They could say, hey, we saw you guys did a really great job on this contract. What sort of contract work should we be looking to apply to in the future that would leverage the skills you've used there? You need to be able to explain that to in our case, like our business development folks, in such a way that they're not technical, but when they're looking at other contracts, they recognize the right concepts. It's not as easy as saying, well, we used Python and we used Tableau. Another project with Python and Tableau may not be the same type of thing, and you want to be able to properly explain what you did. And sometimes it also means you're not just being accurate in your description, you have to be persuasive in your argument, sometimes persuasive enough that the person you're explaining it to, who again may not be technically oriented, can go and take your explanation and make your argument to someone else. You pitch an idea to your team lead on a client project and say, hey, I think if we did this, um, created this algorithm, it would be helpful for this. They may have to go without you to their boss and make the argument that the algorithm you pitch to them is something worth investing in. So I think communication skills are hugely important, and they end up including certainly verbal communication skills, written communication skills, often visualizations. How do you visualize what you're doing? And beyond just being descriptive of what you're doing, which is important enough, actually take that next proactive step to be able to convince someone that what you're doing is, not just that it works, but it's the best solution, that it's the right thing for them to do. And again, you have to be able to do it to multiple types of audiences. You're not always going to be talking to people who understand every technical concept that you're doing. You're also not going to be talking always to people who understand sort of the business factors behind it that drive what you're doing. So I always, 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 in every interview I've done for interns, for data scientists, it does not matter. I want to hear how they explain things, and I want to hear how they do it. Science will give them a heads up, like, hey, we're going to ask you to talk through a project you did. So take your time, prepare for the interview, be ready to talk about it. I'm going to ask you follow-up questions. I might interrupt you on purpose just to see how you deal with it, because that's what a client could do to you. They could interrupt you halfway through your slide, and they're going to say, I don't get it. What's the point? You need to be able to, you might be able, need to, you're going to need to respond to that and do it well. And also, it's a big part for us. We're looking to hire people who are going to do great at ITC. They're going to be promoted. They're going to be here for a long time. That's always the ideal. That's the thing that takes you from just being, say, a junior data scientist or an intern to a new hire, to a senior data scientist, to a team manager, is your ability to communicate and to communicate to numerous different types of people. So I always look for that. I'll pass it off to John Hammond.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. I mean, communications is huge. The other thing we look for is curiosity. Um, you know, um, you want someone that digs into problems, right, and understands them, and really uh, wants to figure out more, right, take the next step. So curiosity is big for me. But I run an innovation shop, so curiosity is important to me. We run a pitch day internally at the company, and just having good ideas and thinking about your customers' problems, and might not get to do them on contract, right? Because you got prescribed things you have to do, but coming up with those things gives people in the back office the chance to say, hey, we can build you a prototype, and then we can write a white paper about it, or something, and we can pitch it to the customer to win new work, right? So curiosity is great. Data scientists often have skills in particular areas, like you might have Python skills, or you might have a stats background, but and that's table stakes for being a data scientist. But the ability to understand the context of what you're doing is extremely important. Just because you run an algorithm and it gives you an answer, it doesn't mean it's the right answer. You have to understand the context of what you're doing, what data actually is important and which isn't important. So you have to understand the problem. So, and you're going to hop around a lot in your career. I mean, at our company, you might be working health records and HR data one time, and a mission model for an aircraft at another time. So, having to dig in, being able to dig in quick and understand the context of what you're doing is really important. Um, Going with that is, though, it comes out of stats background. I've worked with people that weren't considered data scientists in the past, that might have been called ops research, or something else, but they're data scientists. They do a similar job. And one thing, if they come out of a stats background, they often understand the concept of error. And Intel analysts definitely understand the concept of confidence, right? So when you come to a conclusion, you have a confidence level. So being able to incorporate the error, understand the error and how it builds over time in your models is really important. So not just coming to conclusion saying that's the answer. No, did you look at the confusion? Did you consider the error and the compound error that's going into your conclusion? So that's really important to us. And the last thing is probably bias, because we deal with like Social Security and the VA and even HR data. They want to do a lot of things. They might want to say, hey, which legal case should I pursue? And you build a model, you think you're taking into consideration things that don't have bias in them, but there are secondary effects that substitute for bias. You have to watch out for those things. So being able to understand bias and how it creeps into your models is also very important to us. So I think that's probably enough stuff for intangibles.
All right. Ada Zaz, anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the biggest thing is culture followed by grit. So I know for a while, right, especially uh, the more so our tech colleagues on the Silicon Valley side, right? A lot of companies you saw big proponents of culture, right? But it was mandatory fun, things like that. So internally, right, we've tried to make sure our culture is inclusive and conducive to a healthy work environment, right? Uh, but one way we ensure that is making sure we hire for the right cultural fit. Um, and part of that is grit, right? So I think a lot of the other skills can be learned. So if someone doesn't necessarily have the statistics background, right, the comp sci background, or just the overall, right, just to how to handle things when like SageMaker, right, because that's more so on the cloud side, that's machine learning and cloud integrated together. All of that stuff can be taught, but you just got to have grit. And I think that's something a little bit harder to measure, right, within an interview. So there we more so look for how did you get to where you're currently at, whether it's your coursework, right? What were some of the life challenges? What was some of the adversities that you had to overcome to get to the position where you are today? Because your past can be, a good indicator of where you're going to go, right? Doesn't mean that you're going to stay in the same spot forever, but that's what we really look for, right? Is that cultural fit based off of the grit that you've put in? Because again, I really believe that any job can be taught, right? You don't have to be a right fit from day one, and even if you don't think you qualify for a job, apply for it because that's what everybody else does. So, just my 2 cents there.
I would just add, if I could, real quick here, is that, and this applies really for today's world, especially in DoD data analytics, and you're having security issues and everything, you're not going to work remote more often than not. So having that open-mindedness that I may not be able to sit at Starbucks behind a laptop is probably something you might want to rethink about, especially if you're going to the DoD classified world or government classified world.
Very good point. Yeah, you see that a lot of people with SCIs with the poly, they want to be working from home, but if they're working from home, they're not actually getting their hands on TS work. So at that point, there's no point in holding that clearance. So that's definitely a good point. All right, so that wraps up all the questions we have for the panelists. I'd like to open it up to any questions, but as well, I want to open it up to the panelists if they have any um, uh, additional information that you guys would like to share. You guys are more than welcome to share that now. The floor is yours, and then we will close it out.
The only thing I would add, just real quick, is like it doesn't have to be a conventional path for you to get into where you want to get into. My son has a degree in business finance. He started working at a finance company, but then he got into the computer analytics, data analytics side of their stuff, and he was able to show them how to improve stuff 3 or 4 seconds for a transaction, and subsequently built that career into data analytics, and that's where he's at now, and he's enjoying it.
Awesome. That's a Very good point. It's not about where you start, but where you want to get to. You figure out your
Bingo.
path.
I would also follow that up with we've talked a lot about skills, and often people talk about technical skills as things that can be learned, and we talk about intangibles as things that can't, that you either have them or you don't. I don't believe that's the case. I think intangible skills are often, in many cases, harder to teach. If you want to learn AWS, you can sign yourself up for an AWS certification and learn it. But if you want to improve your communication skills, I'll tell you what I do is to test myself. I go and explain what I'm doing at work to my mother. My mother has an MBA. She's very smart. She took both calculus and statistics after graduating college because she was worried it was going to tank her MBA GPA. She is not a math person. She is not a science person. She does not get it. If I can explain what a project I'm trying to pitch at work to my mother and she understands it, I know that I've explained it well enough. You know, and you can build up. I think, people signs here, oh, I want you to have good communication skills. I want you to be independent. I want you to be a problem solver. You can train yourself in all of these skills. But I would also say if you're acquiring a skill and you don't like it, you don't like flexing it, you don't like learning it, if you're online, you're learning how to use Tableau and you say, wow, I really hate this training in Tableau. Be careful about what skills you acquire just to get a job, especially in the government. They want people who have experience in something. So if you build up your experience in Tableau for some reason and you just absolutely despise it for I don't know why, I think it's fine. But if for some reason that is something you hate, be careful of that. Be careful of gaining skills and advertising yourself as having those skills if they're not things you want to be doing. There's a lot of ways to be a data scientist. If you are doing it in a way that you are not enjoying it, that's not a good sign. You can gain other skills that are valuable to the government, and you can still work for government agencies and then doing government contract work. But I would just say it's great to get a certification. It looks good on your resume. It does help you get hired, but just be careful of what you go for. Don't just grab something just because you think it'll help you get hired. Learn something because you want to be doing it, because you could be doing it all day, every day for a very long time.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Very important point. You're spending 40 hours a week doing it, so it's majority of your awake hours. So you don't want to be miserable. All right, awesome. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists today. You guys did an excellent job, and thank you guys very much for your wisdom and expertise and pointers. And we look forward to having everybody on for our April panelists or panel here in the next few weeks. So if you guys have any questions or want resume reviews, please send them to hbcuhire@theleadingniche.com. And we will get you assigned with a federal contractor for a one-on-one mentoring session. But without further ado, I want to thank you. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day and have an awesome rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.